Hello everyone, this is part 16 of What If Naruto Was Raised by His Father, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. A scroll had been thrown towards the opposing boy from sand. He looked at it oddly, then transferred his gaze to Yukio, who looked startled, as if he didn't mean to throw the thing. The other boy have a gallant laugh as he picked up the scroll and tossed it up into the air over and over and over again. Yukio stayed silent, his face was full of shock, but secretly he was laughing inside at what the elder lad had been doing. Lost your scroll, you stupid nitwit. Serves you right. I know what's in here. I saw you use all those weapons before. This one carries them, don't it? And with my luck, I'll use your precious scroll against you. Laughed the elder as he threw the scroll into the air. He used a chakra thread to wrest the seal off and then opened it, only to be at his demise. Because at that very moment, Yukio started to laugh like a madman as he threw over the other two scrolls and used various hand signs to open them up. Once the three were open, a light started to flash and rocks started to cover the elder boy instantly. Once he was completely covered, he used the other scroll that shot blue flames and engulfed the boy hidden behind the great rock pile. Yukio finished with a fireball jutsu to make the now white stone hot, and, with the throw in the air of the last scroll, half a dozen weapons appeared from inside and sd the once polished stone to shreds. It left no sign of a boy, except for the clothes that scattered the ground. Yukio stood there a moment before turning to the crowd and giving a smirk, and everyone started to cheer at the performance. He looked to his sensei, only to see her looking shocked, then, as soon as she realized that he was looking at her, she gave an acquired smile. The boy smiled back and walked off the grounds. What just happened? Asked Temari as she looked down to the battleground. Where the hell did he go? He's said Shikamaru. That's an interesting technique he has, to be able to use earth element and fire element jutsu together. And, with the right amount of heat, turn the soft sand he created at the very last second into glass. Then he quickly heated it up again to make sure his opponent was then threw weapons mercilessly at the glassed over boy, just for fun. Sakura, what is he? Shikamaru queried as he watched the blonde-haired lad walk away. I told you, they're all idiots for creating such a thing, Masakazu muttered as he folded his arms in disgust. I had forbid him to use it, responded Sakura. He doesn't seem to listen, Sasuke added, a smirk playing on his lips. Sounds like someone else I know, Kakashi said as he appeared behind Sakura's two students, both whom gave a yelp at the man's sudden appearance. Sasuke only glared at the man. Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing here? Asked Sakura. Kane wanted to see you, Kakashi told her cheerfully as he lifted the 3-year-old up to Sakura, who took him and smiled. Kakashi walked over and sat next to Sasuke. You're so cute, Sakura chirped. And to think, you have a father like him, added Sakura as she smiled at the confused little boy. Sakura, Kakashi muttered. What? It's true, but he's so cute, said Sakura with a slight squeal as she and Temari, who was now leaning over Shikamaru, played with the small boy who was blushing and laughing. You'd make a good mother, said Kakashi with a smile as Sakura blushed. Isn't that right, Sasuke? Kakashi asked under his breath as he jabbed his elbow into Sasuke's rib, only to receive a glare from the Uchiha. Did you see the fight? Shikamaru questioned as he switched places with Sakura to sit beside the other men. Yeah, Kakashi answered as his smile faded and he gazed at the blonde down below. What do you think? Is he one to be concerned about? Asked Shikamaru. I don't know, it's too early to tell. We're going to have to keep a close eye on that one. Kakashi's gaze shifted to the orange-haired boy behind him, who was looking at the silver-haired man oddly. And who are you? Asked Kakashi as he smiled at the boy. He stayed silent. Is your mother, by any chance, Hana? Asked Kakashi. The boy's eyes widened. As I thought. You look a lot like her. Except your hair, you get that from your father. Has he returned home from his mission yet? Asked Kakashi, only receiving a head shake. Too bad. He always liked to watch the fights. How come you're not fighting? Legs broken in 8 places. I was banned from going on, the orange-haired boy replied as he pointed to his leg, which was in a cast. What a shame. You could have still went on. I would have, said the boy as he shot a death glare at the girl beside him. Hey, don't blame me, you jerk. It wasn't just your leg. Your whole body was messed up. You're lucky I told Sakura-sensei you had nothing wrong with you. Or else she would have forced you out herself. It's not my fault you and Yukio got paired up in the other battle preliminaries. Midori snapped, looking away. And it wasn't my fault that he used that stupid glass window jutsu on me either. Glass window. That's what he called it. Why? Temari questioned. Because, right before the glass totally hardens around your body and instantly king you see the world around you for the last time, as if through a window, answered Sakura. Naruto would have hated this, mumbled Sasuke. They all looked at him. You mean Mr. Uzumaki? Midori queried as she leaned over and looked at the raven-haired man. He probably would have kicked the S out of that boy if he had seen this. For unneeded bloodshed, said Sasuke as he turned his attention to another battle. Naruto, muttered Sakura, wondering where her blonde teammate was. You've been keeping out on us, Lord Hokage. To have a child prodigy on your hands is something else, the Mizukage said, smiling. She stayed silent as she watched what opened up before her. She knew the kid was the last one in his clan. She was also hoping he would not be able to do that jutsu. She'd seen it done in the Great Ninja War, and knew its side effects all too well. My god, what has that idiot learned? Said Onome, remembering she once babysat the blonde-haired boy, whom once was, very sweet and kind. 2 out of the 4 cages looked up towards her. She covered her mouth and looked away, ashamed, remembering that she wasn't supposed to talk. Kankuro noticed something that only he and the Hokage barely caught. Onoma's left hand had been hanging freely, and Gaara, whose hand had been close to it, grabbed it lightly and looked back to the battle down below. The Hokage gave a slight smile and caught Kankuro rolling his eyes and glaring at the woman. Leave him be. She's not all that bad. You never know, she might get him to smile, whispered Tsunade to the man standing next to her. He and the girl had switched places, because the other men were looking at her oddly. That's not what I'm worried about, said Kankuro as he looked back to the matches. You're worried she'll break his heart? Asked Tsunade as she looked over towards the battle. No response. I think you should stop worrying about him, and pay more attention to your own love life. You have someone you've had your eyes on, no. A certain black-haired female from Sand. The Hokage grinned as Kankuro looked over at her with wide eyes. It's a good thing. We wouldn't want all the Sand's men taking Konoha's women, now do we? And vice versa, teased Tsunade as she looked down to Shikamaru, who was watching Temari hold the smaller child and bounce him on her knee. The battles were over. It was 7 in the morning and Sasuke was trudging towards the Hokage Tower after being signaled to go there by a rather odd-looking slug that appeared on his bare chest. He had taken a long time in the shower that morning, trying to scrub off the horrid filth that he thought the slug had left behind. 3 had become Chunin that year. 1 from Konoha, Yukio, actually, 1 from Sand, and 1 from Mist. It was the most Chunin that they had had graduate at the same time in a long time. Almost every year it was either 1 or 2, or none at all. In the Hokage Tower, Sasuke walked up the millions of stairs, as he remembered Naruto calling it, when they were forced to walk them all, not just half. As he made it to the top and knocked silently on the Hokage's door, he slowly entered to find her sitting there behind a stack of papers. There you are. I need you to go and get the Kazekage right now. Tsunade ordered as she looked at the Uchiha, who gave her an questioning look as if to say, why didn't you get me to do that before I came all the way over here? Just hurry up, there was an incident last night that involves a leaf genin, a sand genin and a mist genin. Now hurry. Quote. Sasuke just glared at her, then was handed a slip of paper by Shizune and left without another word to go to where the Kazekage was boarded up. Sasuke arrived at the inn where Gaara, the Anbu girl and Kankuro were staying. He later found out that Kankuro was staying in a completely different part of the building. So, as the Uchiha arrived and asked for the room in which the Kazekage was staying in, the woman blushed and pointed him in which direction to go and where it was to be found. Sasuke nodded his head and gave a slight shiver as the woman, who was in her 60s, watched his ass the whole time he walked away. As he climbed to the second floor, he found the room 327, which the lady had told him, and knocked not so silently upon the door and entered, only to find that the first thing he was looking at was a half-en woman on the king-sized bed. It had been the Anbu he'd seen before, and there she lay with the plain crimson sheets that only covered part of her chest and ended down to her mid-thigh. At first he'd thought he'd entered the wrong room and was about to leave before the woman rolled over onto her other side, exposing her back to his eyes. There upon her back were faint white scars from a sword, and he knew whose sword it was. As he was about to close the door, he noticed from out of the washroom came a shirtless Kazekage. Sasuke would never admit this openly or even to himself again, but his upper torso was almost as good looking as his. Gaara glared at the man before him as sand started to surround the bottom of his feet, and then instantly it stopped when Sasuke put up his hand as if to say stop. Gaara looked at the man before him as he stood his ground. He refused to put down his guard even to get his shirt around the Uchiha. The Hokage needs to speak to you right away, said Sasuke as he looked at the Kazekage. What is it about? Asked Gaara as he looked at Sasuke. The Uchiha was mildly surprised. It wasn't often he ever heard a word out of this man. 3 genin, 1 from sand, 1 from mist and the brat from leaf. There was a problem late last night. That's all I know, said Sasuke truthfully. He stayed silent. I'll be waiting outside, said Sasuke as he closed the door behind him and walked away. Something about being in there bothered. He never thought that a guy like Gaara would ever get laid, but he was proven wrong. Sasuke had gone outside, and stood atop the building next to the inn, not knowing that he was standing right across from the open window of the Kazekage's room. As he looked around patrolling, he finally noticed his position. He watched off and on as Gaara pulled on his long coat that drd down, and then was about to put on his gourd when the girl propped herself on her elbow and looked at him. He couldn't see her face but watched as she grabbed his hand and pulled him towards her. She gave a smile at him, and surprisingly he didn't turn away and leave. Instead he bent down and kissed her forehead, and, from what Sasuke could tell, he was telling her he'd be right back. He watched as Gaara left and the girl then laid back down and covered herself. Gaara came out 10 minutes later and waited for Sasuke to appear beside him. He never liked having a bodyguard, it never suited him at all. But, when he was in a different village, there in fact were laws that had to be kept. So as the two walked down the road in complete silence, Sasuke noticed the Kazekage looking around at something he was sure he wouldn't or couldn't find. Sasuke then turned his gaze back in front of him and spoke. Naruto isn't here, said Sasuke keeping his eyes on the lookout. Quote. Did he go to sand? Last year he was in our village. For more than a week, I believe. HN. Have you heard from him? No, he isn't one to write a letter. He doesn't trust people who send the mail. He'll be back. You're confident. Why wouldn't I be? Quote. Naruto isn't one to give up. One day he will find someone to help him, even if he has to go across the sea. Even if he SD the day after, I'm sure he'd be happy. You should have more confidence in your friends. It's because of him that I became Kazekage, and stayed Kazekage, said Gaara as he entered the Hokage's room. Sasuke had just realized they had made it to the tower. HN, Sasuke grunted as he crossed his arms and left. As Naruto walked past different people, he started to realize how you could tell the travelers from the ninja. He noted this right away, he had never seemed to notice this before now. In his mind, it was kind of sad. As he walked alone, he picked them out quite easily. The travelers had an assortment of different things hooked to their bags that either made a loud noise or a soft thumping noise. The ninja had nothing on them. If they were running, you wouldn't hear them. As he looked at the ninja passing him, he noticed that they all seemed to look at him oddly, as if trying to figure something out. Naruto could only smile as a woman with her small child passed him and kept to the far right of him. Sure, if he was a touchy-feely person, he would have taken that the wrong way, as if the woman was scared of him because he had the 9 tails. But that wasn't the case. She noticed that he carried nothing on his bag. He was just silent as he walked around all these other people with bells and charms connected to their bags. While he continued to walk, he started to think. How long had it really been since he had made contact, or even spoke to the damned fox? Naruto instantly stopped and looked down at his stomach and touched it, as if it would tell him something. People watched his with curious eyes, as they walked by. As the blonde looked down at his stomach, he started to ponder. Why the hell hasn't that stupid fox shown up lately? I couldn't have cut off all connections with him that day, could I? Naruto wondered as he started to think back to when he was 17, and remembered when he and Sasuke fought. That was the last time he'd spoken to or seen the damned demon. Naruto sat down, closed his eyes and tried to find any chakra signals. He put his hands together as if to mold some chakra, and after 10 minutes, he pulled up his shirt and looked down to his stomach to see, or rather, not see, the seal appearing. The thought scared him. Had he really lost all connections with the beast? As he glared down at his stomach, a hand was placed on his shoulder. The blonde turned, his eyes widening as he gazed into the face of the hand's owner. Outstanding people have one thing in common, an absolute sense of mission. Naruto's face went stone cold as he gazed into the face of his former sensei. It seemed everyone was really out to get him this week. His eyes wandered to what was behind the old man. There stood, from what Naruto could tell, were two females about his age or just a little bit older. You would never have guessed because due to the excessive makeup and the scant amount of clothes they were wearing you'd think they were 15. Jiraiya looked to the blonde boy's face in utter amazement. He hadn't expected him to be here. Truthfully, he hadn't expected to see him at all, and he just wanted him to move because that was his woman watching spot, as he called it so many times. It was sad that no matter where you were in a country, there was always a spot for him to watch women. They looked at each other for a good 10 minutes until one of the girls from behind spoke. "Wow, is he your son?" she dumbly asked, before the two looked at each other, then to her, then back to one another. Both men stared blankly at the dark-haired woman. "I mean, you two look so much alike. You obviously have the same hairstyle." The two men looked at one another again, and Naruto noticed she was right. He never even thought about cutting his hair. Jiraiya had stars in his eyes, seeing that his most annoying and most promising student had taken up his hairstyle, unlike the fourth Hokage. "And your skin tone. It's almost identical, and you two are so tall." "Well, the blonde is shorter but still tall." The two girls then squealed as they looked at the two men who stared blankly at one another. Naruto then slowly got up, and dusted off his pants and stood next to the old pervert and pointed a finger at his face and then at Jiraiya and said, "You think that this old pervert is my dad?" asked Naruto, looking at the two women with a span stare. They both held great smiles and nodded. "Naruto, can I speak to you alone?" Jiraiya asked. "Sorry ladies, but could you stay here for a few minutes? I need to speak to my son." He smiled as he put his arm around the boy's shoulder and dragged him away. The two walked off to where Jiraiya knew they were out of sight and hearing distance before letting go of the younger man and looking around just to discover that they were by a river. Luckily, no women were present. "So I'm your son now?" questioned Naruto as he folded his arms and looked at the man before him. "Now is not the time to question the fact that I am not your father. What were you doing just a few minutes ago?" The blonde man was lost. "Can you use chakra now?" asked Jiraiya, in a condescending tone. "No." The Sanin's face went blank. If he wasn't able to use chakra, then why was he trying to mold it? Seeing the elder man's completely lost face, Naruto gave a sigh. "I was trying to see if the damned fox was still there." The 58-year-old man looked completely lost. Naruto glared. "You haven't been able to, started the man before he got lost and mixed up in words he was trying to say. "No, I haven't been able to get a hold of that damned fox in the last 3 years, said Naruto matter of fact as he gazed at the elder man. Muttered the elder as he tapped his chin and closed his eyes trying to think of something. While Naruto just realized he had the same hairdo as the old pervert and was currently trying to find something sharp to cut it with. "Have you crossed the ocean?" said Jiraiya, as he opened his eyes to look at the blonde who was currently pulling on his hair, and then stopped and looked at the man. "Cross the ocean. I've heard of a man who's even more brilliant than Tsunade and Sakura combined. I'm positive if you look around a bit, you'll be able to get that little problem of yours fixed, or somewhat fixed," said Jiraiya, as he looked at the boy whose eyes widened. Quote. "If you take a boat from Lightning Country and sail it east, you'll stumble upon an uncharted land by us shinobi. And you'll find what you're looking for. Wouldn't it be quicker through water country?" asked the blonde. "Quicker, yes, but in the reality of the situation it would take you a week longer to find the man. He lives on the coast across from Cloud Country. So it would be quicker to go and sail from there, stated Jiraiya calmly. So you're not trying to bring me back to Leaf? I am, but this way you'll come back sooner, smiled Jiraiya. Quote. He became lost in the happiness of his student's cerulean eyes. What happened to Sasuke? Asked Naruto as he looked at his former sensei. You'll have to come back to Konoha to see. Truthfully, I don't know. I haven't seen head or tail of that snob since I've been traveling around, but I have seen Sakura. They miss you, you know that. I know, thanks, and don't tell them where I'm going, okay, sensei, smiled Naruto as he took off running. Sensei, said Jiraiya, eyes twinkling. He was no longer known as the super pervert. Oh yeah, you're still the world's biggest pervert. You old pervert, yelled Naruto from the distance, as Jiraiya's admiration for the boy came crashing down like 1,000 shards of glass. Why do I even like that brat, muttered Jiraiya. Lass, where did you go? Laughed the 58-year-old man as he walked back to find the two women gone. And felt utterly depressed again. 2 years have passed since that so faithful day. Sakura sat on the edge of her seat in the hospital waiting room. She'd been taking a rest. A few Anbu members had been ambushed when scouting the area for enemy ninjas, and she'd been trying to heal and fix broken bones for the last 18 hours now. She needed a break, she could barely get up and drag herself home, and she had no energy whatsoever to move. Luckily Sasuke had been there, because if not, there wouldn't have been anybody to heal. As she gazed around, she looked over to her former student Yukio as he stood in front of Sasuke asking him something. The Uchiha had taken this blonde annoyance as his student when the blonde wouldn't leave him alone after the Chunin exams. After the exams he didn't really need a sensei, but he insisted that Sasuke be the one to train him from now on. Tenten had taken Midori under her wing since they both loved using weapons. The odd thing though was that Masakazu had stayed by her side, refusing to leave and go train with anyone else. She loved it, but thought it was kind of odd. I mean, after the Chunin exam they had all ditched Kakashi basically. Sasuke had gone to Orochimaru, Naruto had left long before to go with Jiraiya, and she left after to go with Tsunade. Sakura then shook her head and got up, but then she wobbled for a few moments before her eyes clouded over and her body started to drop fast. She felt someone grab her, but she had no idea who it was. All she saw was green, then red, and blonde. Sakura awoke sometime later, not in the hospital anymore but in a dark, one-window curtain-covered room, with the Uchiha fan painted on the wall above the headboard. Sakura grumbled as she turned to her side to see a ray of light coming through the slightly opened doorway. Sakura groaned once more as she heard the ground outside being shaken from a battle. She knew right away she had been at Sasuke's, there was no doubt about that, but she never thought she'd be in his room again, let alone in his bed. God, doesn't this guy have any guest rooms? Not that I'm complaining, but Lee would think something weird if he were to see me in here, barely awakened, only wearing Sasuke's old blue shirt from when he was 12, and underwear. Wait. I wasn't wearing. Sakura then sat upright as quickly as she could and examined herself. Her eyes were as wide as the dinner plates she ate off of. She looked down at the oversized blue shirt, and pulled on it, then pinched herself. She was no longer under the covers anymore, her legs were behind her, and her hair wasn't in a complete mess like it normally would be when she woke up. She looked around trying to think about what was going on and who changed her. She then pulled the collar of the shirt slightly and looked down to make sure she had her bra on. And it was. She then let the collar hang low, not caring, and slouched back. You're awake, came a cool and calm voice. Sakura felt as if 1,000 knives had gone up her spine all at once. She then shakily looked over to her left to see red eyes looking back at her. Sakura then instantly screamed as she hid herself under the covers and fell off the bed all at once. Sasuke just looked at the pink-haired woman with a mild amused look upon his face. He meant to get some type of reaction but nothing that loud. Sakura, are you alright? Yelled Lee, as he and her former blonde-haired student came running in, sweat dripping off their foreheads. Sakura then looked at them with wide eyes. The blanket stayed covering her lower area while the collar she had pulled down earlier was a bit lower, showing a lot which she'd never shown anyone. Her eyes went wide at what the three males were looking at, and then she gazed down to see her chest. Quickly, as if on cue, she covered herself up and her face went red as a tomato. Sasuke had been facing the other way by that time, sitting on the couch while Lee and her former student held bright red faces as they quickly turned away to face each other, then went even more bright red and then looked away. Sakura watched them lamely try to excuse themselves as she stood up and held the blanket to her body with a bright red face. She then took a deep breath and then firmly and calmly spoke. Who changed me? She asked as she looked at the three males, but two of them were looking at Sasuke with hatred. Was all the Uchiha said as he got up and left. Sakura stared blankly at them before Lee pushed the blonde-haired lad in front of him before leaving. The power of youth is with you. Then left. Yukio, said Sakura in a voice that meant tell me right now, or you're going to s. Hey, well you see, when you fainted, Sensei caught you, and then Rock Lee came along, and it got into a battle of who has the scarier face, and who is better at taking care of you. Then they ended up taking you here, because his house was closer, and Rock Lee had family over. Then Sensei suggested I work on my taijutsu, so Rock Lee and I started to have a small fight. Then 3 hours later, we heard you scream, which brings us right back to here, started Yukio as he slowly trailed off. But, if you two were fighting, that means that, oh my god, said Sakura as her face became even redder, if that was even humanly possible, as she looked wide-eyed at the whole scenario in front of her. Yukio looked down. He knew his old sensei and his new one were in the room alone together, even if the door was slightly opened. He knew something about his sensei that no one else knew, but he was smart enough to shut up about it and never tell anyone, even Sasuke. I'll go find your clothes, said the blonde 14-year-old as he quickly left, to go and find Sasuke. Sasuke, no, he wouldn't, but we were alone. He may have gotten Midori. Wait, she's on a mission, and they would never get Ino to come over, let alone would Ino not still be here. But, Sasuke, Sakura's face was bright red as she plopped herself down on the edge of the bed. She felt the blanket slowly move away from her grasp. She sat there for what seemed like eternally. She couldn't think. Her pale white legs only showed, her eyes showed no emotion whatsoever. She was at a loss of what to think, and before she knew it, a man had walked in front of her and placed some clothes next to her before straightening up again and looking down at her. She then slowly looked up to meet with the black eyes of the Uchiha. She felt heat rush to her face as she looked down and back at the clothes that were laid next to her. Her questioning gaze went back up to the Uchiha. 10, he stated blankly. Wah, started the pink-haired woman. She was with Lee. She came over and changed you. She left before the two idiots found out, said Sasuke, basically explaining why the two men looked at him and thought that he had changed her. Sakura then realized something. Lee seemed so unfazed by the thought of Sasuke undressing her, and looking at her virgin skin before he'd even seen it. She then looked back to the clothes to see a pair of white shorts and a shirt like she had been wearing, just a bit smaller. She had figured that the one on the bed was one of the one he'd worn when he was 12, and this one was the one he'd probably worn now. Quote. She then looked back up to him. 10 took your clothes. I'll leave so you can get changed, said Sasuke as he left the room, and closed the door behind him. She gave a low sigh as she started to change out of the overly large shirt and into the smaller one, that was still oddly a bit big on her, and the shorts were large but didn't look too large for her. She then shook her head and slapped her cheeks a few times to try and get the embarrassment away and quietly walked toward the room's entrance. Have you seen this boy? Asked a masked man as he instantly appeared behind an elderly woman and showed her the old ratted picture. The far-sighted woman looked at the picture and shook her head. Toby then started to wave his arms about, telling her how the blonde man looked now. Toby, come, we can't waste too much time here. Hi, said Toby as he quickly followed the shorter dark-haired man. Silence was met between the two men. They had been in Tea Country for over 2 weeks now and had no luck whatsoever in find any trace of the blonde-haired man. Toby kept his small eye totally on the lookout for anything in particular, while Itachi kept taking side glances towards the taller man. Ever since that day 2 years ago, he'd kept a closer eye on the taller man named Toby. He'd been the one to see Toby. He watched as the man quickly caught the pole that the fox brat had used as a pathetic weapon and throw it at the wall. But, because of the swift movements, his mask had fallen off, and Itachi had only seen part of the man's skin and a small head protector covering his left eye. Or what seemed to be a head protector. 2 years, 3 months, 2 weeks, 4 days, 10 hours, 34 minutes, and 57 seconds, stated Toby right away, causing Itachi to look at the man before him. Itachi's sweat dropped. That's how long it's been since we last saw Uzumaki Naruto, stated the elder man, who acted like he was 12. Where are you from? Asked Itachi, now looking at the man who completely stopped. Quote, comma, quote. Quote, comma, dot, quote. Look, another kind old lady to ask. Have they seen the QB boy? Smiled Toby as he quickly, skippered, as Itachi would call it, toward the elderly woman. That man is so, I want to K him, but he probably K me before I have the chance, thought the Uchiha as she looked at the man before him who was currently scaring the older woman. Sakura slid open the sliding door, only to find her poor former blonde student be thrown into the cool waters of the small pond behind the Uchiha estate be none other than Sasuke. The blonde boy then didn't seem to return from the depth of the water until he leapt out and tried to ambush the Uchiha. Sakura then smiled at the young man as he quickly used a replacement jutsu and appeared behind the Uchiha, but was caught off guard when he was once again thrown into the depths. Sakura then slowly walked down from the outdoor walkway and made her way towards the two fighting ninja. She liked the feeling of the grass between her toes as she walked alone the yard without any shoes on. By the time she'd gotten down there, Sasuke had noticed her presence and turned around and looked at the woman. Where's Lee? She instantly asked, not noticing the glare the Uchiha sent her way before regaining a stoic expression. Sakura-sensei, the blonde called as he stood on top of the water waving to her. His coldness towards other people was still the same, except to her for some odd and strange reason. He showed more emotion than anyone he'd ever met. Look at you, walking on the water, smiled the woman as she walked past Sasuke, and smiled at the Uchiha before joining her student out on the water. You can walk on the water too, said the boy, a little clueless. Oh, course I can, I've been able to do it since I turned 13. I've been able to do it since I was 13 too, smirked the blonde quite proudly. Have you now? Sasuke and Naruto were both 12 when they learned how, stated Sakura as she tried to remember. Really? Wow, sensei, you look different, said the blonde as he looked her up and down. Do I? Yeah, this is the first time I've seen you wearing something that's baggy on you, and no shoes, said the blonde, only to receive a sweat drop from the elder female. Oh yeah? Lee had to go on a mission, added in the blonde. Did he? I wanted to speak to him before he left, said Sakura, as she sounded a bit annoyed. HN, was the only sound that came out of the Uchiha as he turned his head away from the elder woman and blonde boy. Oh yes, Sasuke, started Sakura as she started to walk over to him, before stopping in front of him and looking him in the eyes. The youngest Uchiha just blankly looked into her eyes. I wanted to thank you for taking care of me, again, and to say sorry for bothering you again, smiled Sakura sheepishly. HN, was his only reply, which in turn made the pink-haired woman put her head down and try to hold back some frustration. It was around 6 o'clock in the evening and Sakura along with Yukio were finally about to leave the Uchiha estate. Sakura had mainly watched the two fighting, training, as they called it. It was barbaric how the two fought. It reminded her of Naruto and of Sasuke when they had been younger and were always at each other's ts. Yukio now stood next to the pink-haired woman. She still wore the same outfit as before. The one the Uchiha had given her to wear since Tenten had absent-mindedly taken home her clothes for God only knows what reason. She didn't mind wearing his clothes. In fact, it made her feel calmer than when she was in her own clothing. As the two started to walk toward the front of the building, Sasuke wasn't too far behind until he said, Sakura, stay here a minute, I have to ask you something. Sure, you go on ahead Yukio. I'll meet you there okay? Smiled Sakura as she watched the blonde nod and run off. What is it? She asked as she looked at the taller man, with her head seat to the side. Quote, comma, quote. Quote, comma, quote. Do you love him? What? Asked Sakura as she gazed at Sasuke with confusion in her eyes. HN, if you don't love him, then let him go. Sasuke, what the hell are you talking about? He just looked away. Are you trying to ask me if I love Lee? He barely even glanced at her. You're weird. HN, he gave her the look. Anyway, Sasuke, I have to go. I promised him some ramen after training. Would you like to come along? The Uchiha blinked then shook his head. Sakura continued to walk until she was almost around the corner of the house before she added. Sasuke, if you'd like to know. Lee and I, just as she was about to finish what she was saying, the young blonde came out of nowhere and pulled on her hand and dragged her along with him. By Sasuke! Yelled the pink-haired woman as she gave a laugh at the blonde-haired boy. Sensei. Said Sakura as she walked alongside the blonde-haired 14-year-old. What were you about to say, before I interrupted? Oh, it's complicated. Are you and Lee having problems? I guess you could say that. What about? Mostly over Sasuke. Sasuke-sensei, why would you be having problems over him? Because Lee doesn't really trust me, muttered Sakura as she stirred her ramen bowl. If you really don't love him, then you should just say so, and find someone else. But I am in love. But is it with Lee? Asked the blonde as he ate his ramen at an inhuman speed. Great, I'm getting my personal love life handled by a 14-year-old who's never had a girlfriend, muttered Sakura as she pushed the boy lightly from his chair. Hey, laughed the blonde as he looked at his old sensei. Unknown to the two laughing shinobi, a third was hiding behind a wall with somewhat of a surprised look across its face. Then turned into amusement, followed a sly smirk. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.